Aloha kako, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I am Gail, one of the team members for Compassionate Ko'olapoko, and I'm joined with my colleague Kumubella and our special guest, Anake Ku Kahakalau. So for those of you who don't know us, we are a Hawaii-informed DOE and community-based, culturally rooted, trauma-responsive initiative that started in 2019. I know that was a lot of words. By some very compassionate people representing the Castle Foundation, Windward Community College, and the Windward District of the Department of Education. We are always guided by the wisdom of our kupuna as we do our best to cultivate well-being in our ko'olau community. Our events are currently funded through the support of the Hawaii Department of Education, and we're so grateful to them, as well as our past funders. Today, we have an amazing guest, and my colleague Kumubella is going to go ahead and take it from here and introduce her.
Mahalo, Gil. Aloha kako, everybody. Again, mahalo nui for spending time with us today. We so appreciate your presence. Most importantly, I'm fangirling at the moment because I have admired Dr. Kahakalau for at a distance, stalking her for years. And so it is my pleasure. Gail was like, you can introduce her because I'm so thankful for all the work that she's done. And so I'll just say a little because I know she's going to tell you a little bit more about herself. But Auntie Ku, as she humbly refers to herself, Dr. Ku Kahakalau, is the founder. She's an award-winning Native Hawaiian educator and researcher, the founder of ʻEA, which is Education with Aloha, among many other things. I hope I get this correct, Anake, but she is the first person in the world with a PhD in Indigenous education and has created multiple very successful culture-based educational programs throughout Hawaii. For me, she's an award-winning songwriter. That's actually how I got to engage with her prior to becoming an educator in the DOE myself. And so without further ado, I know you're all excited to hear from her. We just want to mahalo Auntie Ku Kahakalau. Mahalo nui for being here with us, Anake.
Mahalo nui, Bella. I appreciate the kind words. A little bit exaggerated, but that's all right. Like I will do a proper introduction, but I just want to again first welcome all of you folks. We're going to be talking about the imperative of aloha in education and the way our kupuna express that is uaola loko ʻike aloha. And I'm looking forward to this time together. Before I forget it, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat and then we can respond to them at the end of the session. Let's just kind of focus and get ready to learn, and that includes myself too, because my teaching and learning is a reciprocal process. It happens at the same time. And so we're just going to kind of try to get rid of all the stuff that happened today or in the past and just be focusing ourselves to be ready to learn. So if we can inhale all the goodness that's in the world, in the environment, in nature, and then breathe out all the junky stuff that we have acquired and accumulated within us. Makaukau. Hanumai ka pono. Hanuaku ina mea pono ole. Hanuho, hanumai ka pono. Hanuaku ina mea pono ole. Hanumai ka pono. Hanuaku ina mea pono ole. Mahalo. And it's a way that our kupuna use breath. We can have a whole separate section on the importance of breath for our kupuna, but it's always when you're kind of not too sure what to do, breathe. That's a really good thing to do. So we'll start with protocol. If you know any of these chants, please chant along. We're starting with an inclusive greeting chant that begins by addressing the most powerful entity, deity that you acknowledge. And it goes down to the most smallest / insignificant being within the sound of our voices. So for me, it's these lychee little babies that are coming up on my tree right outside. It's the mo'o that's walking around on my wall over here. Those are all the lehu lehu. And so it's an outside in greeting. And then from there, we will segue right into Eho Mai, which is a centering chant. And then I will do my ho'olauna. Aloha, aloha na akua, aloha na aumakua, aloha na li'io Hawaii, aloha na kupuna, aloha na makua, aloha ka lehulehu, aloha. E ho mai ka ike mai luna mai o nā mea huna no e au o nā meli e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai ai ho mai ka ike mai luna mai o nā mea huna no e au o nā meli e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai ai ho mai ka ike mai luna mai o nā mea huna no e au o nā meli e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai. Aloha mai kākou o ku, hina hina kui kahakai kahakalau ko o inoa. And if you have never seen the plant hina hina kui kahakai, that's what it looks like. That's my middle name. O Honolulu ku'u one hānau, and this is what it looked like in 1960 when I was born. O Makua ku'u kai. This is where I learned how to feed myself off the ocean, laying net and diving. O Hawaii ku'u mokupuni. Even though I was born on Oahu, I've lived on Hawaii Island since 1991. So the longest that I have lived. O Kilauea ku'ulua pele. While we live on the other side of the island, because my great grandmother's name is Opu Pele, and our family is had Kuleana to Pele, I consider Kilauea my volcano. O Hamakua Ku'umoku, Hamakua, which is the east side of Hawaii Island, that district, that's where I live. O Kukuihaile Ku'ukulana Kauhale, one of the oldest villages in all of Hawaii, already mentioned during the time of the gods. Wakea lived in Waipio Valley, and they mentioned already Kukuihaile in those stories. So right above Waipio Valley. Waipio Ku'uawawa. We have a 5-acre farm in the valley, and if we've been educating people of all ages in Waipio since the early 90s. Ohilawe Ku'uailele. Our 5-acre farm, if I'm looking Mauka, I look directly into Hi'ilawe Falls. O Wailoa Ku'ukahawai. We have a little river that runs by us, but it's really shallow. So if we get hot, we jump into the river over here by the estuary, because most times our ocean Waipio is too rough. O Kunaka Ku'uaina. So this is our 5-acre piece in a place called Kunaka, which is also the name of this ridge, and which was the name of a Waipio chief. O Kahuehu Ku'umakani. The huehu wind is my wind. That's the wind that blows in Waipio and cools off everything. O ka wa'awa'ahia ku'u'ua. The wa'awa'ahia rain that makes furrows into the cliffs of Waipio is my rain. So while you're writing into the chat where you're zooming in from, I'm zooming in from Kukuihaile, which I just showed you where that is. I wanted to explain why I used the places that have shaped me into who I am to introduce myself to you. For Hawaiians, our relation to place is really, really important. And by sharing these places, I hope I have told you more than what school I graduated from and what diploma I got and what car I drive. It's a little Nissan Versa, so nothing to brag about there. But rather than talking about those things which to us are really not important at all, I wanted to share with you the places that are important to me, the places that I love, the places that make me happy, the places that heal me, and to grow relations like that to place is one of the important things that we're going to be talking about today. While we're together, I'm going to use a bunch of Olelo Noeau or Hawaiian proverbs. And if you want to really learn more about everything Hawaiian, doesn't matter what it is, I would highly recommend you invest $20 in this ebook that you can download from Bishop Museum Press. That includes these almost 3,000 kalamai olelo no eau that were collected by Tutumeri Kawenapukui, our most foremost 20th century Hawaiian scholar. And many of these olelo no eau are the foundation of education with Aloha. What we know through these olelo no eau, these poetical sayings, these pearls of wisdom, these proverbs that have been passed down verbatim to us for thousands of years. That is where our ʻike is located. And we are the most blessed indigenous peoples, because I don't know of any other indigenous peoples in the world, not even European, that have these kind of collections of proverbs that we have, and it's thanks to Tutumeri or the Puki. So highly, highly recommend for anybody who is teaching or wants to learn more about things Hawaiian, download this ebook. And when you're standing in the store, waiting or at the bank, just scroll through it and you'll blow your mind about the stuff that you will learn just by scrolling down. One of these olelo no eau is lehu lehu a mano mano ka ikena a ka Hawaii. Can we say that together a little bit slower, everybody? Lehu lehu a mano mano
Mano
ka ikena a ka Hawaii.
Hawaii.
And the literal translation of the lehu lehu and mano mano are actually number words. It says great and numerous, but really these are infinite numbers. So infinite or greater numerous is the knowledge of the Hawaiians. So even though for the since 1778, we were told by some, not everybody who came, but many who came, that our knowledge was worth nothing, right? That our knowledge was not useful anymore for the modern age. Our knowledge was evil, was demonic, right? There were all these things about Hawaiian knowledge, what it was and what it was by outsiders. Their definitions of our knowledge and the description of it. Our ancestors were very clear. They knew that our knowledge was great and numerous. And it wasn't just good for prior to Western contact, it is still good today. And it needs to be advanced, just like the knowledge of any other people, right? The Germans didn't stick with their 1795 or 90, whatever knowledge. They advanced it. The Chinese people have advanced their knowledge since whenever, right? Everybody continuously advances their knowledge. So we as Hawaiians too, we have a huge knowledge base to work from, and it's our responsibility to advance that. So let's look at traditional Hawaiian education. And when we try to analyze it based on these olelo based on stories, based on descriptions of our Hawaiian historians, because we're so fortunate, we have the largest indigenous library in the world with millions of pages written by our people for us in Hawaii. Education is described as hands-on, as culture-based, as informal, personalized, relevant, place-based, project-based, values-based, and rigorous, as validated by performance-based assessments. And when we look at all of those words, we go, huh, interesting, because that's the same thing we want education to be about now, right? It's the same words that describe the education of our kupuna prior to contact is still the same best practice education today. So hence that idea of ancient is modern. So let's look at what did this traditional education result in? Well, when the first people came, Western people came and made contact with our kupuna, they found thriving, self-sufficient island societies. They noted an exceptional general health and welfare, advanced scientific knowledge, as irrigation, fishing, or you name it. Abundance of food, water, and happiness. The idea of happiness that is mentioned in many early accounts, they talk about the people of joy, the people of pleasure, laughter. Wherever they went, they heard laughter. And when you go into Hawaiian communities today, you hear the uncles on the beach drinking some beer, they're laughing, right? You go into a kitchen where there's a bunch of Hawaiian aunties cooking, you'll hear laughter. So this concept of happiness, we can't minimize that, even though the efforts have been made, right, to completely eradicate it from our lives. So much so that our kupuna love to have fun, so they made even work fun. We have a olelo no iao that says Hilo mahi ha'aheo, Hilo of the proud farmers. And what happens in Hilo is still yet, it rains a lot, so the soil is really easy to till. So they still had to till and they still had to plant their kalo or wala, whatever it was that they were planting. But our kupuna made a game out of that. They made a game out of planting by using their o'o to make the holes. They wore lace, like this was a joyous occasion, and they worked in unison. It was a hula kind of idea, right? You do it together, and it was a beautiful and a joyous kind of a picture. And so I think that's the part that we have to remember when we're working with Hawaiian students and when we want to integrate things Hawaiian. For us, ho'ole'ale'a, or to have a good time and to have fun and to enjoy ourselves and to enjoy amusement and laughter includes stuff that from a Western perspective is looked at as not really fun. When we hear the word work, fun does not usually come to mind immediately, right? But from a Hawaiian perspective, it is. Work should be fun. And when you with your family doing stuff together, and it's like we had a wedding this past weekend. My daughter got married, 400 people. I had to make foods, two types of salad, libu and ho'io salad and ko'ele palau. 400 people. That's work, clearly, right? It's not like it's gonna magically happen, but we had so much fun. We were laughing, we were just joking around, teasing one another, and peeling, whatever needed to get done, cut, chop, and it was so much fun, right? And learning too. When we first started our school within school at Honoka'a, our biggest criticism was, "Oh, your students aren't learning anything." And I was like super offended. I said, "Why would you say that?" These are my colleagues now. Hello. Why would you say that? And they said, "Well, every time we go by your classroom, your students are laughing." That was our problem. We were laughing too much. Now, how sad is that, right? With education, when the mindset, somehow our educators think, and not everybody obviously, but there is that mindset that, oh, you could be laughing too much, which means you're not learning. For Hawaiians, learning and having fun go hand in hand. Our traditional way of education was always making learning fun, as that Olelo Eosho clearly shows. In addition, this traditional education resulted in what I'm calling flourishing arts right now. But Hawaiians, we didn't even have a word for art because we took everything to that level of art. So when we made utilitarian objects, they became objects of art, right? when we were making tapa, it wasn't just regular old tapa, okay, it holds together nice. No, it was the most exquisite kappa, a watermark where you could see through it that had stamps and blah blah blah. So everything we did based as a result of our traditional way of learning made us take everything to its highest level and create the most beautiful things like the feather capes that the ali'i presented to our early explorers. They said this was the most beautiful and exquisite artwork that they had seen anywhere in the world. So definitely in traditional education, leading to an extremely high standard, right? That's what I want to emphasize here. Extremely high standard of everything that we do and did. Our language, we didn't have any reading and writing system, but we had an extremely sophisticated oral language where the average person had superlative oratory skills. They see somebody, they chant for the next half hour about all the things, the relations of that person and how they hooked up, 20 years ago, putting it in a very blunt form, but that's really what it was about, right? They would exchange these elaborate chants with metaphors, it was poetry, and integrating Olelo no Iao and having the kauna, the hidden meaning, so that even if it's one sentence, it really has three meanings, right? That same word or that phrase or whatever it was. They love to riddle and really play mind games to challenge one another and to use the language at its most complex and intricate level kind of thing. And then another thing that you find I haven't found anywhere else in the world, Polynesians didn't just communicate with the spiritual world through chants. Most people do that, right? You go to a Catholic church, or at least traditionally they used to chant, right? You go in a Buddhist temple, they chant, right? You go to Native Americans, they chant. Um, it's kind of a general thing that when you communicate with the spiritual world, chanting is involved. For us, we did that, but we also chanted and still chant to the environment, to the aina, to the kai, right? Before we enter, we chant asking for permission. And we chant to one another, like how we did today. I did the greeting chant, right? I'm gonna do a chant at the end. So that's something that as I said, I haven't found anywhere else except in Polynesia, where we also communicate through chant with the environment and the people and not just the spiritual world. And another thing that this traditional education resulted is was 100% sustainability and independence with almost the same amount of people that we have today, minus the tourists. And that was done by creating an ancestral connection to the land, right? That our education taught us that we were descendants of Papa and Wakea, and we have the islands and the Kalo. Therefore, we have a collective responsibility to Malama Aina. We developed expert land use practices, that was able to feed, uh, as I said, a huge population. There was when Cookdom arrived, there's no hungry people living in Hawaii. There's no houseless people living in Hawaii. We have lots of food, and we have lots of starches, and we have lots of fish, and we have a system that regulates that. So there's a taboo on a certain fish during a certain time, or whatever the resource is, core, whatever it could be, and really engage in expert propagation and fishing practices and share our resources. There's no, yesterday in the newspaper, 39 billion or 89 billion or something, a $1 billion person, living in Waimea buying up our land. I mean, why would you need a billion in the first place, even already? But this guy, according to this, was $9.5 million a day. He makes more money. I mean, for us, whatever resources, what we had, we shared with one another, and it worked. So then we have what my husband calls the Great Interruption that starts in 1778 when Captain Cook arrives. And our old system is slowly broken down, especially after 1820 when the missionaries come and look at us and say, can they be human? Are they not perhaps a link between man and the brute? That's what Bingham, first party missionary, Hiram Bingham, he compares us to the missing link. I will say no more because I always get upset with it when I think about somebody calling our people that were strong and healthy, right, and muscular, and that was too much. The wife had to throw up because it was just too too much male energy right in front of her. But being called the missing link, and everything that we did and everything that we believed in belittled and demonified, and made evil and bad. It was really a very, very difficult time for our people, besides dying like flies from introduced diseases. And yet we persevered, and in 1834, so this is only 14 years after the first missionaries land and bring an alphabet that was developed by a Hawaiian, Opukahaia, in Boston, and then he passed away before he could come home and introduce it. So the missionaries brought it with them. So 14 years after this alphabet is introduced, King Kauikeaouli establishes free universal schooling for boys and girls in the Hawaiian language. There's no other place in the world, and I would challenge you, if you know one, please let me know, that has free universal schooling for boys and girls anywhere in the world. If you're not rich in Europe, you ain't going to school. If you're a girl in America, same thing, you cannot go to school. It's only the boys and only the rich people in general at that time are privileged to be schooled, right? To be able to attend the school. And as a result of that free universal schooling, within another 10, 15 years, so 30 years after the introduction of the printing press and the alphabet, our people are among the top 3 literate nations in the world. Imagine it. From one moment having no idea of reading and writing, and 30 years later, this is a generation later, we're among the top 3 literate nations in the world. So there's no issue with Hawaiians being able to learn. Right? In case somebody wonders about that part, there is no issue. It's in our DNA to catch on really quick and to be able to learn anything we want to learn. And then we have the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy, and we have Act 57 that is passed in 1896 that says the English language shall be the medium and basis of instruction in all public and private schools. So from one day to the next, we go from Hawaiian language instruction to English language instruction. And on top of that, in intense uh, inoculation is probably the best word that we can say. Americanization, and so every morning. So this program for pretty patriotic exercises came out in 1906, and this is literally from it. It's the idea that on each Monday morning, a new text being introduced in a brief talk by the teacher, written on the board, and during the week repeated by the pupils each day. And this is the kind of quotes now, and these are Hawaiian children, that are born into a Hawaiian family where everybody only speaks Hawaiian. These are Japanese children that are born into families that speak Japanese. They don't know nothing about America and being American, but they are forced to say, I was born an American, I live an American, I shall die an American, I intend to perform the duties incumbent upon me in that character to the end of my career, without any explanation who and what is an American, right? It's just brainwashed, drilled into them. In fact, they have to salute, Hi Hitler kind of a salute, every morning in front of the flagpole and say, we give our heads and our hearts to God and our country. And this country is not Hawaii, it's USA. One country, one language, one flag. When again, nobody in their household speaks that language, that English language. And so within less than 100 years, we go from the being the among the top 3 educated people in the world to being the most under and uneducated major ethnic group in Hawaii, with the highest negative performance indicators and the lowest positive performance indicators. So we have to understand that, because if we don't, then we think our kids are the problem. But as my friend Manulani says, data confirms that the lower educational achievement of Native Hawaiians is a reflection of the incompatibility of the current education system with Native Hawaiian cultural and educational propensities and preferences. And Uncle Skippy says it a little bit more succinct. He says, our children are the evidence. They're not the crime. And so what we have found out is when we can switch this, when we can go back to a traditional way of education, and we've been engaged in that now, my husband and I see my husband next to me up there, we've been involved in this since the 1980s. We can reverse that trauma that was inflicted on our people as a result of this these changes that happened, right? We can't undo the changes per se, but we can use successful models of education that worked in the past because they still work today, and because we know that the other system that has been imposed upon us has not worked. I mean, there's no data to show that it has worked, and there's lots of data to show that it has not worked. So we've been involved in recreating, revisioning, revitalizing, advancing, however you want to put it, a way of education that is, as I said, at once ancient and modern, traditional and contemporary. And we call it education with Aloha, or Ea for short. When I write papers or do formal presentations, I call it pedagogy of Aloha. Some people call it Hawaiian culture-based education, or HCBE, Hawaiian focused education, Aina-based education, education. And now we can also put trauma responsive education there, because it really is trauma responsive, right? It's trying to deal with this trauma and use research-based approaches to respond. And so the outcome for AL education with Aloha, whatever we want to call it, is we want to grow 21st century Kanaka Pono. So Kanaka, human, person, can also mean Hawaiian, and Pono meaning good, upright, with high moral qualities, just, virtuous, fair, successful, honorable, responsible. That's our goal. And when we are able to do that, then we can start to see changes in our just, I think, economic situation, in our social and emotional status, and in so many other areas. So let's look at this education with Aloha that emerged since the 1980s. Again, nobody sat down and figured it out in our head. It was what we did. We went into the environment and we learned from the environment and with the environment and with our students. And when we asked them, what do you like? Then they told us what we liked, and we did more of that. And eventually, this is the formula that emerged. The first thing we have to do is build strong reciprocal relations among all that are involved in the educational process. The second thing is that whatever we are teaching has to be relevant and has to make sense. The third component is that students have to understand that we're not here to learn for learning's sake. I don't know, whoever came up with learn for learning's sake is not Hawaiian. Let's put it that way for sure. Because it makes no sense. Why should you learn for learning's sake? You should learn so you do something with that learning. Our kupuna, they understood that that learning comes with kuleana, or as you learn, you get this kuleana to do something with that learning, to apply that learning, to advance that learning. And when you have those three, you start with relation building, strong relations, make sure what they're learning makes sense to them and is relevant to them, and that they understand that they have a kuleana to that ʻike, to that knowledge. You're automatically going to end up with rigor. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail. And if you do it correctly, you're also supposed to have fun, because that is the Hawaiian way. Without fun, it's also not Hawaiian. So the learner is enveloped in this education with Aloha in an atmosphere of Aloha. If the learner doesn't feel safe, if the learner doesn't feel supported, if the learner doesn't feel cared for and loved, then we're not doing it right. And then we are also not helping that learner to reach their highest potential. The wonderful thing is that none of us need to have any college degree to care for, to respect, and to love our students, right? We all can do that. That's something that is free, doesn't cost you a cent. The more you give, the better it gets. It's not like you're gonna run out of aloha, So it's a wonderful, wonderful formula to help our students reach the highest level. So the first thing we look at then, therefore, are our instructional practices. Again, different from the Western perspective. When you go to UH, it's curriculum, instruction, assessment. From a Hawaiian perspective, wrong already. Because it doesn't matter how great your curriculum is, if you don't build relations with your students, and they don't trust you, they don't like you, it doesn't matter how great your curriculum is, because they ain't gonna be learning. That's my how should I say that? My observations after that decades in the classroom and working with students outside wherever. So the first thing is instructional practices, and they should be just based on aloha, aloha aku, where you share your aloha, and aloha mai, where you accept their aloha, because our kids still have lots of aloha. It's just that we have to channel it, and we have to celebrate it, and we have to respect it. So one of the things in our classrooms, whether they're indoor classrooms or outdoor classrooms, it really doesn't matter, is that we have to continuously engage in reciprocal relation building. So creating activities where the students get to know one another, where they get to know you and you get to know them, where you get to know their families, where all of you get to know your community, where you get to know important people in your communities, etc. And we call that aloha kanaka, right? We're building relations with kanaka of all ages, intergenerational relations. Um, and that's not something that you do the first 1 week, maybe 2 weeks of the school year, right? Oh, let's do some, build, what are they called? Those kind of games that they play at the beginning of the year. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not enough. You got to build these relations throughout the school year. You continuously have to make sure that they get to know you better, you get to know them better, that you develop really close relationships. I have students, I just ran into one, I had them in 1985, and we hugged like we was old friends. It was so beautiful to see him. I hadn't seen him since 1985. He was my student at Kalani High School, and it was so wonderful, that pilina, that relationship after so many years, and again, we were a student. He was my student, I was his teacher, in a totally, it was the same with the other students as well, but those kind of relations that last for a lifetime, really. So aloha kanaka, really important. Aloha aina. People say, oh yeah, aloha aina, put the bumper sticker, wear the shirt, whatever. But when is the last time they went out and connected with the aina? It's like your grandma. Say, "Oh, I love my grandma." Well, when did you see her the last time? I think so, 10 years ago. That doesn't mean you love your grandma. If you love your grandma, you better get over there and show her that you love her, right? So same with the aina. It's making relation building. And many of the kids, if it doesn't happen at home, we have to do it at school, building relations with the environment. And then also with the spiritual world, we have to be a little bit more careful there, but we're just going to do that under the cover of protocol. So let's look at this olelo no iao. Hanoho, uaola loko ʻike aloha. Can we all say that together? Uaola loko ʻike
ʻike
aloha.
aloha.
Okay. So I don't know when it was, maybe 20 years ago, the word social emotional learning, maybe it was before or after, these words come, trauma responsive, these words just come from the continent and everybody thinks it's the greatest thing. And it's a brand new concept, social emotional learning. Well, this Olelo no Iao is hundreds of years for sure. It could be thousands of years already. We don't know the exact dates when they were coined, but certainly hundreds of years. Waola loko ʻike aloha. Love gives life within. And the way Tutamari Kawanapukui analyzes it and explains it is, this is her words. I didn't come up with these words. Love is imperative. I repeat, imperative for one's physical and emotional welfare. So our kupuna completely realized, right, that imperative of love in education. And aloha doesn't just mean love in the lovey-dovey and always being nice to somebody and never hurting their feelings kind of love, right? This love is also what I would call tough love, right? Which is this idea of paka, of criticizing in order for you to step it up and do better, right? This is also the kind of aloha that means respect. Do we really respect our students? Because when we start to respect them, they're going to start to respect us. And um, so aloha, not just as I said, as letting them get away with everything. That's not necessarily aloha, right? It's aloha in terms of truly caring for them and wanting what is best for them, at least to the best of your knowledge, and helping them and supporting them, but not letting them get away with everything. A lot of times people confuse those two things, right? And they think we're just letting the kids go, that is aloha. Not really, right? If you think of your grandma, I'm sure she alohaed you, but mine definitely pulled my ear as well. With aloha. We had a young boy, he was a second grader at that time. His claim to fame was most suspended in kindergarten at Waikoloa Elementary. And he was running across the campus and ran right into my husband. And you're not supposed to run on campus. So my husband goes, "Well, hey, Kelly, what's up? Where are you going?" And he goes, "Oh, I gotta go to the office." And my husband goes, "And that's a good thing, right? Because if you gotta go to the office, you're in trouble, and that's where I'm. Auntie Koo, the principal, is in the office." And he goes, "Oh yeah, because Auntie Koo, she scolds me with aloha." But he got it. He got it. He knew he was gonna get scoldings because he did something wrong, but he also knew that Auntie Koo loved him even if she scolded him. And I think that's a really important part for us as educators to keep in mind. And so at our school, we had created these collective behavioral expectations, with the very first one being aloha kekahi ikikahi. Love one another, respect one another, care for one another. And that applies not just to the students now, right? That applies to our staff as well, whether they're teaching staff or other staff. That applies to our administration as well, and to everybody that comes onto campus. So that when people did come to the campus while I was there, they really many times we heard them either saying or putting it in writing that the aloha permeated the campus. That's the way they described it. Some of the other ones that we have is kokua aku kokua mai, e malama I kokuleana, and mahalo I ka mea loa'a. But I think the main thing is, really with relation building is, that you select some olelo no eau or other statements or phrases or words that really focus on this relation, right? Building relations, because all of these have to you can align it with relation building, and then practice them, right? As you and so adults and the students together learn how to work together and how to collaborate and how to get things done. Our people have always been affiliation oriented. Like if you want me to peel taro and I have nobody, it's only me, I'm not a happy camper, to be perfectly honest. You might hear me grumbling and I'm just not a happy camper. But if there's 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 that are also peeling taro, oh, I love peeling taro. That's my favorite thing to do. So for us, when we have to do it by ourselves, many of us really don't like it, just to be perfectly honest. But when we can do it in a small group, we love it. And it's the same activity, right? We nothing changed except we don't do it by ourselves. We do it with other people. So as much as possible, if we can change, this Western system focuses on individual achievement. We focus on group success. Hawaiians focus on group success. And so the more we can have settings that foster group work, if it's small, large group work, it doesn't matter, and group achievement, the more our kids are going to get engaged because this is their preferred way of learning. Au kupuna se pupu kahi i holomua. United we progress. And so we have another olelo no eau that also refers to this concept of aloha and in education, and that is uaola no ikapane ake aloha. Let's say that together. Uaola
Hola, no.
ikapane ake aloha. Mai kai. And the literal translation is this life in a kindly reply. So traditionally, and even today, still yet, when you go to somebody's house, you bring something, right? That's kind of how it works. And gifting, we gift each other.
Stop,
But
stop.
sometimes, huh? Can we make sure everybody's muted, please? Um, but sometimes, you wasn't gonna go there, but whatever happened, you still end up at somebody's house, but you don't have anything to give. Um, and in that case, a nice word, a compliment is also something that you can offer instead of a gift. And so you can say, "Oh, smells really good over here," or "Oh, I like the way your yard or your kukui tree," whatever it is, just anything and kind words. In education, it's even more important sometimes, and I've been a teacher for a long time, so I know that sometimes they take us to the very edge of our sanity, right? To that very point where we want to snap. I would be lying if if you're with kids, it happens, right? Where they just, and maybe it wasn't even on purpose so much, but something that you just didn't like in the first place, and then they keep needling you or rubbing it in or whatever it is. Um, and in those situations, then to stay in control and to continue to engage with them in friendly and kind words rather than snapping at them. And obviously today we can't swear anymore. There was a time when people did swear in the classroom. um, but even mean, right? uh, Being just unkind, right, to them, embarrassing them in front of other students. That's one of the worst things you can do, is embarrass Hawaiian kids in front of one another. They can get embarrassment is a huge, way bigger thing for us. And this idea of sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me is completely wrong when it comes to Hawaiian people. We think words can hurt us, and we have lots of Olelo proverbs that speak to that. So really being careful on how we talk to our students, and when we see that somebody is troubled, not just going like, oh well, hope I gotta go home. I don't really want to deal with that kid now, even though you clearly see there's something wrong with him or her. Um, Pulling them aside and saying, you want to talk to me? Is there something you want to share? And over my many years, we've had incidents where it was one teacher pulling a child aside and talking story with them about some because they just didn't seem right, something seemed wrong, ended up preventing that kid committing suicide. I mean, it can be to that extreme, right? So please always uh, keep that in mind that our ancestors strongly believed that the pane aloha, the response that is done in love, brings life, brings health, brings healing. And many of our kids that are acting out, and it's because they're traumatized. And it's not just the historical trauma, but it's getting lickings from their families, or being shamed because the father's in jail, or whatever it may be. There's so much things happening. So sometimes your one word may give that life that nobody else is providing to a child. Ike aku, ike mai. Kokua aku, kokua mai. Pela ihola kanohona ohana. Recognize and be recognized, give and receive help. Such is family life. So in your classroom, creating opportunities for students to get to know each other and get to recognize each other, learning their genealogies and things like that, and helping one another, reciprocal help. For us, for many Hawaiians, our greatest joy is to help others. But we also got to learn how to receive help. Like, if you ask me, you need help? Nah, I get him, I get him. And then I'm like, I should have told him, yeah, but it's just our nature to do that, right? So we have to learn, as for us, that kokua, receiving help, and allowing people to help us is actually the harder part than the giving help. But we got to learn both of them. And we got to learn that, in our island environment, we just have to rely on one another, and that's what the families traditionally did, and that's still what we need to do today. And so some of the things, as far as the continuous relationship building between the teachers, the students, and their ohana, is really things like learning about their places, the places that have shaped them into who they are, and then by them doing their whole launa the way I showed it to you today. Learning about where their families come from. And it's not only Hawaiian, but wherever in the world, because we have so many multi-ethnic and multi-racial families today. Also, all of the ancestors, where do they come from? If they have genealogy, learning about these genealogies of one another, so that you can say, when you meet somebody else, you say, hey, I have a friend at school. That's her auntie too. That kind of thing. And among Hawaiians, it's not that uncommon for them to know each other's genealogies, because it's an important part of who they are. Also, personal histories and stories. We should know if one of our students' parents is incarcerated, or is dead, or is on drugs, or is something, because that's gonna impact how we're gonna work with them and help them, right? Because they're clearly going through something major at home that another student has no idea, because they come from a functional family. That's just um, as far as things that they're into. So like we our school that we started is up in Waimea on Hawaii Island. We got a lot of rodeo kids, right? They do bull riding, they do barrel riding, all that. We we as teachers gotta know who's gonna be on the rodeo on Sunday, and if we can go there, we should go there and support them. But at least on Monday we should ask, how did it go? What did it, da, 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 because those are things that our students are involved in, and we should know those things about them, so we can make them feel good. And as I said, that we care, right? Because that shows caring, right? If you have no idea what your student does outside of school, how can they feel like you care about them? I wouldn't feel you care if you don't know nothing about me. And then also, what are their personal preferences? Do they love to sing? Do they love to draw? Do they love to dance? Do they love to whatever it is, right? Uh, so that you can integrate those particular into the learning and into the assessment. So personalization, right? Another one of those brand new words, personalization. Common, we got to personalize. I could put every kid had their own learning plan, It wasn't written down, but there was a plan where they wanted to go based on their propensities, based on their preference and their gifts and their talent. They were groomed to be, whatever it was that they showed affinity towards. So we had personalized education at least for 2,000 years. Um, and so one of the relations in a Hawaiian family is really important is who's older and who's younger, because the older ones need to protect and feed and all of that, and the younger ones need to listen and obey and support the older ones. So the more we can within our schools create kai kua'ana, which is the older sibling, kai kaina, which is the younger sibling relations, um, and especially among the boys and then among the girls, that's something that is really, really works really, really well. It's worked so well for 2,000 years, and still yet keeping understanding that they have responsibilities, because eventually the kaikainas will become the kaikuana, and then they will have the younger ones below them that are helping. So understanding that there is a, a progress, yeah, as you get older, your kuleana changes. And so family-oriented and intergenerational projects, when we talk project-based learning, is a really important aspect of that also. And as much as you can, any kind of multi-age peer education works so well. Our kupuna, yeah, our traditional system was really older siblings teaching the younger siblings. That was really the system, and the adults only got into the mix on just specific technical skills. But the general education was really olders teaching youngers, with the caveat that it's always reciprocal, and the older ones were also learning from the younger ones at the same time. And so the more you can integrate peer teaching and peer learning and allow students to share their knowledge and skills in a non-competitive setting, because that for us, learning is not about competition per se, right? It's about acquiring skills that will help us to move forward. Again, the more you can bring the ohana in, and the only way you can do that if they feel like you really want to know them and want to get to know them. Also bringing in the kupuna as much as possible, highly recommended. 1978, the mandate date in Article 10 of the state constitution clearly calls for kupuna in the classroom, but it's been watered down, and not so many children today are able to interact with kupuna, and especially with kupuna that are knowledgeable about things Hawaiian, because when they grew up, everything Hawaiian was looked at as less than. If you can bring in cultural experts, and notice this is Brother Nolan, he's telling stories to our, I don't know what they are, elementary kids for sure. But instead of doing it in the classroom, having them all sit down, he tell them, come outside. They all lay down on the grass, and he tells them their story there. It's a little thing, but it's a huge thing, because these kids love him, and they feel like he loves them, right? So it going outside, taking them outside is always a good thing. The other part is that we gotta get away from that Western concept of the sage on the stage. That the teacher knows everything, and if you don't, then there's something wrong with you, the teacher. We are all learners, teachers and learners at the same time, and it's perfectly fine for us to learn together with the student. It's perfectly fine to say, I don't know the answer to this question, but together we can figure it out. Where do we start? How do we get to the answer? And work on it together. Letting the kids see that you're human, that you love to have fun just like them, that you sometimes can be awkward, just like them, but just that you're human. I remember when I first started teaching, and one girl saw me in the store, she goes, Kumu, you shop? Hello. But sometimes they really don't look at us as regular people, right? But when you play games with them, when you interact with them, they can see that you are definitely also, a kalaka just like them, and you love to have fun just like them. Um, as I mentioned, Aloha Ainat, building relations with the land. Taking the students out once a year on some field trip is better than not at all, but it's not sufficient to help them develop a deep appreciation and affinity for the environment. And so they have to be a regular project, and they can be small projects on the campus, in your classroom, but and voluntary things saying, I'm going to be at the beach, at this and that beach on Saturday afternoon with some trash bags and some gloves. Anybody wants to come and help me? You're more than welcome to come. If it's too much humbug to like get the paperwork through to go on a field trip, right? Then you can always just informally, we do it all the time, informal gatherings, that are not required. We as the family comes along, depending on the age of the kids and things like that, and engage them in building relations with the land. And then the engaging or building relations with the spiritual world, we call that protocol, right? So one definition for protocol is just doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And so what protocol helps us to do is to strengthen the relations between us and the environment, and between us and the spiritual world. And so those can include, centering ourselves, as we did at the beginning of this work presentation. It can include when we have food available somewhere, to acknowledge and to show our gratitude for the food. We don't have to pray to a specific deity. We can do something extremely generic that just shows our appreciation. It can include when we're going into, let's say, at the forest, or into a sacred site, or wahipana, um, to do our chant, to ask for permission to enter. All of those things would be included in protocol. And so that is, as far as the instruction is concerned, right? It is focusing on creating relations with people, creating relations with the environment, and creating relations with the spiritual world. And so that's Aloha Kanaka, Aloha Aina, and Aloha Akua. And then the next thing is the relevance, right? The curricular focus. Now, that was the instructional piece, and I could say so much more, but unfortunately, I only have so much time. So we're going into the curriculum. We'll do all those a little bit less, and maybe in the future we can have another session and can go into those areas a little more detail. But the curricular focus should really start in Hawaii, right? Whatever we teach should focus on what's happening in Hawaii, as far as the place Hawaii, the environment of Hawaii, and the host culture, and our values, our traditions, and our practices. And all of that aligns with Ha it really, really nicely. In addition, we should, talk with our students, and discuss with our students, and create projects with our students that address real contemporary Hawaii or world issues, right? We shouldn't be doing theoretical things. We should be doing practical things that again show that responsibility to the learning and make an impact. And as much as possible, the curriculum should focus on what the students are interested in, what they are passionate about, as much as possible. So when it comes to relevance, the idea is really to create curriculum that's interesting and that makes sense, that they can relate to. And that usually means that it comes from their knowledge base, right? From the things that they know, which is Hawaii. So the type of learning really that we encourage is what we would call authentic learning, where it's not just about, as I mentioned, learning for learning's sake or learning for the purpose of learning, but they're learning to complete an authentic task. So on the left-hand side, you have these guys. They had they went into the river and they had a service sampler, got all these different species, and now they're looking at what is in, what's in the river, so that they can figure out how to increase the good things that are in the river and decrease the bad things that are in the river, and actually, be up there part of a historic water study that happened in Waipio Valley, and you can see how engaged they are. In the middle, we have a young man who is cutting a huli, a taro, and again, they pulled this huli, they put the kalo, they're gonna make their huli, plant the huli, and then they're gonna cook their taro and actually eat it. So they didn't just pull so he could do this one middle section of the process, right? The whole thing from beginning to end has a purpose, which is that this is the taro that was planted by them and now it's ready to harvest and to eat. On the right-hand side, you see a young man and he's sewing. Now, that's not his favorite thing to do, I can assure you that. But in this case, he is sewing his attire for his hula drama, and he wants to look good on that stage. And so you can see how focused he is. And this is not a focused young man in general. If there was a general question among his teachers, is so and so focused? The answer would generally be no. But when it comes to finishing something that is important to them, right? Doing a task that's important. And there's lots of geometry involved, when you're doing that sewing, and all kinds of other learning that happens at the same time. And so integrating the culture into the curriculum is a really important piece, from games to art, to hula and chant, reading books that are written by Hawaiians for Hawaiians. But in general, when we're looking at curriculum, we are really looking at curriculum that's Hawaii centric, that starts in Hawaii, on your island, in your community, and then it can go outwards. We're not saying stay in Hawaii, but we're saying start in Hawaii, start in your community, and then whatever concepts you're teaching in your community, which the students know, and therefore it makes sense to them. If you're talking about a certain place, they know that place, you can use that as a real analogy rather than using some place far away that they've never seen or heard of, to explain a concept. And then from there, when they get it, then you can say, oh, and now we go to here, another place in the world, and another place in the world, and you see how it's different, or you see how it's the same, and do that comparing and contrasting. But we really believe that all content areas, every single content area, should start in your community and then move outwards in concentric circles. And as much as possible, if you can learn in and from the environment. I know that is extremely difficult with the way that the whole field trip systems are set up, the way the bus, I'm not going to get into that, but the monopoly of the bus systems, the school bus systems, and the amount of money they're charging to get kids out of the classroom and everything. But if you can, they will learn so much better in and from the environment than in the classroom. And when they're out there, they should learn about that place, wherever they are. So we had a Waipio project from Monday to Thursday, every other week, from 5th grade to 12th grade. My two daughters were in Waipio Valley, learning in Waipio Valley. People said, oh, they're never going to be able to go to college. Well, they're both college graduates. It was no problem going to college. But learning about the place names, the stories, the chants, the winds, the rains, how the people that live there, that's all important. And so then becomes the idea of, this growing this collective responsibility to take care of the people, the land, and the spiritual world. In this case, these guys are also part of that water study by making contributions to their families, to the schools and communities, by actually practicing Aloha Aina, island sustainability, and Malama Honua, by perpetuating and advancing the knowledge of our ancestors and revitalizing our native language and culture, and striving towards world peace. So responsibility can have many different, way. It can look very different. So when I was the principal at Kanoka Aina, the kindergarten teacher came to me and said, "Is it okay for us to do a what was it called? Waste audit, a waste audit." Never heard of a waste audit, so I said, "Sure." Because it's not going to be something bad. If she's a good teacher, I trust her. So our kindergarteners did a waste audit of what was happening on our campus, and they found out that the two most um or three most popular things that ended up in the waste was cans, aluminum cans, paper, not surprising, and milk. Well, it's that 1% stuff they call milk. It's not really milk, but that one. So that. So we had it in buckets and we give it to the pigs, but we said, what else could we do? So then the seniors at that time were looking for projects for the senior project. So one said, I'm going to figure out what we can do with the milk. And then another said, I'm going to figure out what to do with the paper. And so they did their research. And then several months later, the whole school on the top right got involved in making papercrete stepping stones. So instead of concrete, they made out of recycled paper, papercrete stepping stones. They beautified them with Hawaiian ferns that would go into our gardens because it gets really wet up in Waimea. And then the second one figured out what to do with the milk. She said prior to latex, the invention of latex, all paint was milk-based, starting with the early Egyptians. And so when we built our first platinum LEED certified building, this paint right here, the yellow paint that you see, that's milk paint mixed in with olena, right? That's a native dye. And the kids could occupy that they actually painted it and they could occupy the room instantaneously. No headaches, no smell, no nothing. And today, this is 20 years later, that milk paint is still beautiful. And you can see it when you go to Aloha in Waimea. Food sovereignty, right? We all this imported food, if it stops, we're up the creek. Let these kids learn how to grow their own food, and you don't have to do huge things, but every school should have a garden, and they should learn how to use food and how to grow food and how to prepare food. And then the rigor is going to be automatic. It's going to be academic slash global rigor, cultural slash native rigor, and also social and personal rigor. And that is because our kupuna told us, kule kanu, strive to reach your highest level, your highest potential. And so our assessments are basically projects and performances that are purposeful and useful and allow our students to exhibit what they actually know, rather than our standardized tests, which just show what they don't know. And so we do these performance-based assessments various ways, but the main one being an annual hula drama where all students from preschool to 12th grade are on stage singing and chanting and sharing with authentic audiences, which are one time students from other schools, the next time families, and then the third time the general public, what they have learned throughout the year, and educate these authentic audiences about Hawaiian language and culture and traditions. So as much as possible when it comes to assessment, try and make it as multisensory as possible. Allow them to dance their answers or build something or draw something or weave something or do an oral presentation rather than a written presentation. And just like our kupuna, the more we can personalize the learning, the better it is too. So rather than her writing an essay about how to throw that, let her show us that she can really throw that net. And so the students become creators of knowledge. And we really feel that that's the kind of jobs that we're preparing them for, that allow them to actually stay in Hawaii. And many of those things the things that they create in their projects, that over the years our students have created card games and board games and games of skill, reading cards. This is all student work. She was a middle school student when she did that. Calendars that they've created using Photoshop, posters that they've created, multimedia projects, including anti-vaping campaigns, COVID safety rules, recycling tips, eating green, colorful vegetables, etc., historical, all kinds of different things. They even created TikToks on how to teach your dog how to speak Hawaiian. And we were the first public school or school students, period, that had hardcover bilingual books published. So this guy was in middle school when he wrote this book, and those books are available for free on Ulukau to download, or you can buy them also in the stores. And that includes also our coloring books. So the kids have infinite potential. Here they are, they created signage. So if you ever come to Hawaii Island, and you go to Waipio Valley, don't go down, just stay by the lookout, because our students created 5 beautiful signs for you to tell you everything you need to know about Waipio, and therefore eliminate your need to go down into the valley, since the only public space is the road that goes down. But basically, before this, and I think we put those up in 2003 or something like that, and then they got weathered, and they were just replaced. The county replaced them last year using the exact same template that our students had created in 2003. Um, Prior to that, when you got to the valley and you looked down, you had no idea what you were looking at. It didn't even say YPO. Um, and you didn't know what that meant. You didn't know, the history, that this was the hub of civilization in ancient Hawaii, like New York is today. All those kind of things nobody had any idea when they looked down. Locals and visitors alike, right? Nobody knew because there was nothing there. And so our students decided to work with Bishop Museum, where they got all these historic photos from, to create these 6 by 3 foot signs that are now at the lookout. They're bilingual with Hawaiian first, and then English. That was our way of asserting our language, and telling everybody that this is Hawaii and there is a Hawaiian language and this is it. And basically since then have educated tens of thousands of visitors about this Wahipana, this sacred place called Waipio. You can do that in your community, creating signage for the special places, the Wahipana, in your community. We at that time, the Queen Liliuokalani Children's Center, which is now the Liliuokalani Trust, provided funding to pay for the signs. But then, as I said, once they were initially there, the second time around, now the county picked up the bill. And I think this whole signage thing is a lot more popular now than it was in 2003, where we have much more signage on all of our islands than we had during those days, and especially bilingual signage. So the idea is really to create impactful exhibitions of knowledge that educate others, like our hula drama or these signs, that are part of effecting change and make a difference. And so for us, we don't really believe in written tests that much. We believe that the students need to learn how to read and write, but to show how much they know in a specific content area, that can be demonstrated in lots and lots of other ways rather than written or multiple choice tests, right? And whatever assessments we give them, they should make sense. There should be a reason for them. They should be used for something, right? So for us, the idea is really we shouldn't have give our kids any assignments or tests that all the purpose is that I put a number on a piece of paper and the rest it goes into the rubbish. That's not a Hawaiian way of thinking. And then the last part is our fun part, right? Having fun. Again, intricate part of learning from a Hawaiian perspective. And so at one point, I gave all of my students a license to play that gave them permission to play and have fun while learning. You know, sometimes you have to just spell it out. It's okay, King. You can have fun. You should have fun. And so some of the ways that they have fun is hand puppets. They love to play with hand puppets. Uh, group competitions like hooky hooky in this kind of case. And they're learning collaboration at the same time. They're learning physics, right, through sports like hakamoa and Ulumaika and Uma and whatever Hawaiian sports. Um, they're learning also how to be good winners and good losers, right? Humble winners and humble losers. And so we really believe that play is a really important part, and we know that when kids enjoy while they're learning, their retention is much, much higher. And so whenever you can engage them in Hawaiian sports and games, in hula or song, anything like that, according to this indigenous proverb, those who know how to play can leap easily over the adversities of life. So knowing how to play is a really important part. So what's the impact of this education with Aloha? According to this study that was done in 2010 by Kamehameha Schools, um, it builds a strong sense of Aloha and Ohana, which fosters caring and supportive relationships. The integration of aloha and other values cultivates a virtuous behavior. That's that pono part we talked about at the beginning, right? It also cultivates environmental stewardship, so that's that aloha aina, and civic responsibility among future leaders. So this is not what Antiku is saying. This is what the researchers at Kamehameha Schools are saying. And so these next ones are also from that same study. That it engages students. It results in cultural and academic rigor. I don't like those words too much. I prefer traditional and contemporary rigor because if we weigh culture and academic always scores higher. It's more important. Versus if we say traditional and contemporary, they're equally important, at least to me. And then it enhances personal family well-being and empowerment, and even the economic viability of Hawaiian communities by providing jobs and resources. It positively affects math and reading sources, all from the same study, particularly for students with low social emotional development. That's the ones that we're trying to target, right? That's the ones who need our help the most. And education with Aloha affects even their standardized test scores, which to me is the least important part, but the fact is it still does, right? Which is totally awesome. It enhances their social emotional well-being. It results in greater Hawaiian culture affiliation, civic engagement, and school motivation, and it encourages them to put their cultural skills to use in their community. So this is all external research that validates that. Already in 1997, the Native Hawaiian Education Council said, in the long term, culturally driven, community-based, family-oriented education, which is what we're doing, will be the foundation upon which the Native Hawaiian people will rise, embracing Native Hawaiian self-determination through educational change. So this is not a new concept. This has been around for a while, and we're moving closer all the time. In 1824, King Liholiho went to England to seek King George's protection for the Hawaiian kingdom, and they had expected a savage. Because at that time everybody who was not white was considered a savage, kind of. And so when he gets there, perfect attire, perfect hair, perfect eyebrows. Check out those eyebrows and that hair. I mean, that's pretty, yeah, perfect, right? Perfect. They're just blown away, and they're going like, how can that be? We expected, again, a savage. We expected somebody that could barely maybe make some ugly noises, but couldn't speak and certainly didn't look like that, right? And he basically tells them, duh, nā vai hoi ka ole o kia kamai he ala hele I maa I ka hele ia e o mau makua. Wouldn't be wise on a path walked upon by my parents and my ancestors. And I feel the same way, Why wouldn't we be wise walking on that path of our kupuna? We were the greatest navigators in the world, and we still are because we can still sail around the world, around the whole world now, literally. Um, and so we need to stand on that ʻike kupuna. So, in summary, for us, pedagogy of aloha means that you have to have aloha for all of your students, not just the good looking ones, not just the smart ones, not just the well dressed ones or well mannered ones, whatever it is. We have to have aloha for all of our students. And the ones that need it most are the ones that are most marginalized, right? That have the most trauma, that are experiencing, in addition to our general cultural and historic trauma, have personal major things happening, houselessness, incarceration instead of parents, uh, dire economic situations, etc., etc. That's the number one thing. Everything else I think we can work with, but the aloha is the number one thing, and only you can make that happen, right? Only you can decide, because you have aloha in you. Everybody has aloha in you. You have that power to say, I'm going to use my aloha to make my classroom a better place, a safe place, a loving place for my students. It would also help if you knew about native language, culture, and other local content, understand how natives learn best, and I hope that this short presentation helped you a little bit to understand a little bit better how Hawaiians learn best. Also, how to live and teach with compassion and kindness, and understand and know the tools and strategies to create relevant, hands-on learning environments that are permeated with aloha, with care, respect, and kindness. So I'm going to do my closing chant, and then we still have maybe a minute or two now. If you want to, I'll be happy to stay for questions and answers. Mahalo e, mahalo e ka lehu lehu, mahalo e nā makua, mahalo e nā kupuna, mahalo e nā li'i hano hano, mahalo e nā o makua, mahalo e nā akua, mahalo e. So in this gratitude chant is the same as the first one that we opened with, except in the reverse order, where we start with the most insignificant and then go out towards the most powerful entity that we acknowledge. So I want to mahalo you all for being here, and then turn it over to questions and answers. I did also want to say that Gail and Bella both have my contact information, and if you need something specific or if you think we can help you folks, please let me know.